Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of Communication Skills. This week I've asked you to read 2 chapters. The first chapter, chapter 4, deals with critical listening skills. The second chapter, chapter 5, addresses the importance of analyzing your audience. Let's start with listening. This is a speech communications class, and it's all about becoming a better speaker. But this important chapter reminds us that effective speaking springs from effective listening. Hearing and listening they're very different processes. Hearing is an involuntary process. You don't have any choice in it. You hear without any compulsion, just like you breathe without any compulsion. It's involuntary. But listening is a voluntary mental process. In other words, just as we don't need to think to breathe, so then we don't have to think to hear. But listening is something we have to choose to do. This chapter addresses 2 important things: the ability to listen and the ability to think critically. First, let's talk about listening. There are 6 stages of listening in your book. The first is hearing, then understanding, then remembering, then interpreting, evaluating, and responding. So the first stage is hearing. Hearing is that involuntary physiological process that we've already talked about. We can't help but hear. We have no choice. But we do choose what we listen to. We attend to some sounds while blocking out other sounds. That attending or paying attention to involves our willingness to focus on what we're hearing. However, if what we're hearing doesn't captivate our attention, then our mind will drift and we begin to think on something else. We begin to dwell on something else. We begin to attend to something else. So speakers have to work to capture the attention of their listeners, to hold the attention of their listeners. And there are several ways that you can accomplish this as a public speaker. First of all, focus your subjects on, or your speeches on subjects that are of particular interest to your audience. Use words and images in your speech that evoke pictures in the minds of the receivers. This is why preachers tell stories. This is why we use word pictures, because if you can get them mentally engaged, you'll keep their attention. Another thing you can do is incorporate activity and movement into presentations. This is probably the most difficult presentation to attend to because I'm not able to move around. I just kind of sit here and talk into this camera. But when you're on a platform or a podium, or you have the opportunity to stand and address an audience, you're moving about and using your hands and your bodily motions. Those things help maintain attention. Another thing that helps is whenever you use stories, perhaps anecdotal stories, personal stories, stories you've heard, that create suspense or describe conflict or evoke humor. All of those things help you get the attention of your audience and hold it. The second stage is understanding. And during understanding, we focus on what a message means. We decode the message based on our own sense of understanding, our own sense of what the language means and what the metaphors mean. And there's a shared understanding between the receiver and the sender. We have an understanding about what we're talking about, and we decode that message in that context. And hopefully when we decode it, it means the same thing to us as it did to the sender. Meaning is often contextual. Don't jump to conclusions before the message is over. Listen to the entire speech. Make sure that you get the context right. Only then can you truly understand what's being said. The third stage is remembering. And during remembering, we mentally save what we gain from the speech we're listening to. We decide what's important. We decide what we're going to remember. But a good speaker builds repetition into their speech in order to help us know what we should remember, to help us know what is important. And so if you're going to influence your listeners' ability to remember, then you need to remember to reiterate the main points. The important things need to be said more than once so that your audience keys in on, this is what I want you to remember. The fourth stage is the interpreting stage. And in this stage, we seek to understand the message from the speaker's perspective. This is where we start to nuance what we've heard. This keeps us from imposing our meaning onto the speaker's ideas. And it takes some thought. Sometimes meaning is inferred. Sometimes it's deeper than just the spoken word, and we have to think about it. We have to consider the circumstance, and consider the speaker, and consider the perspective that they're addressing us from, and that provides the meaning for what we're hearing. The final stage is the responding stage. And this is where we react and provide feedback. This occurs both during and after speech. When you laugh at a joke or you applaud a strong point, you are responding. You are affirming the speaker. You're letting them know they're doing a good job. And then if you fall asleep during a sermon, that's also a response. That's a way of responding as well. It's not as affirming. The communicator gets the message that they need to work a little harder on getting and maintaining your attention. But this idea of feedback and responding is a continual part of the process. You're doing it all the way through the message you're receiving and afterwards.